Hello everybody and welcome to Mr. Stansfield's Education Videos. Today I'm going to actually be breaking down this video here from Spoon Graphics. The goal is to create a glowing effect in Photoshop, like this picture here that we're seeing on the video. And what I'm going to do is basically go through the video step by step. I should say I'm going to follow the video, the Spoon Graphics video, step by step. But what I'm going to do is kind of explain, slow things down a little bit and explain in more detail why decisions are being made and what's happening in Photoshop so that you can maybe remember or learn something new about something and then come back to it later. That's kind of, I think, the goal here. So with that being said, let's jump right into it. All right, so we're going to start here with the same image. This is a free image downloadable from pexels.com, and I'll link to it as well. The Spoon Graphics video is also has the link to this image, so you could use the exact image, exactly how we're using it in the video here. So the first thing that I wanted to point out is actually a shortcut key. So when I hold the spacebar key, if I have any of the other tools selected over here on the left, if I hold the spacebar key down, it turns into, over here in the bottom left-hand side of the Tools palette in Photoshop, it turns into, it's having some trouble here because of the screen recorder, but it turns into the hand grabber tool. So spacebar allows me to move my photo around so I can zoom in on things and highlight or focus on certain areas on my screen. That's a great shortcut key and I use it all the time. The other shortcut key that you may want to be aware of is the F key on the keyboard. If I cycle through, there are three different looks here. If I press the F key 3 times, 1, 2, 3, it'll cycle through those 3 looks. It opens the file up here in this look, but if you hit the F key once from the default view, you have a full screen view, and that's where that hand grabber tool, the spacebar, and then clicking and dragging around can be really useful. So we're going to start here by selecting the antlers. Now in the Spoon Graphics video, they use the pen tool. And the pen tool is great. It's a really effective and I would say really useful way of making a selection. However, if you, like me, are working on a trackpad on a laptop and you don't have a really nice Intuos not trackpad, tablet, or at least a mouse, using the pen tool can be really difficult. And so what we're going to do is we're going to try to tap into some of Photoshop's automatic selection modes. So let's jump into that right now. The goal, again, the overall goal of what we're trying to do is just select the antlers. So let's figure out a couple of ways that we might want to do that. So let's go over here to our tools. We'll grab the quick selection tool, and at the top you see up here select subject. So let's click select subject, and this is something that you can do with the quick select tool, and it's going to look at the photo, try to identify a subject, and then make a selection. And if we can see our marching ants here go around kind of like partway up the antler, one ear, not the other, it goes around half of the body. This particular image has relatively low contrast. There's not a whole lot of contrast as far as Photoshop is concerned between the subject and the background, so it makes that a little bit difficult. So the other thing that you could try here is a quick selection tool without using the select subject. So let's go ahead and deselect. Now, I'm going to show you the shortcut key and also where to find it in the menu. If you have a selection that you wanted to get rid of, you can always go to select and then deselect, and you can see on the Mac, it's Command D to deselect. So let's go ahead and deselect. Let's zoom in a little bit. Some more shortcut keys. Command plus will zoom in. Command minus will zoom out. And what I'm going to do is reduce the size of my quick select a little bit. So I'm going to do that by hitting the left bracket key on the keyboard. And I'm just going to go ahead and click here. And with this selected up here, there are 3 options. There's a normal selection, new selection, add to selection, and subtract from selection. If you have the new selection chosen and you hold down the shift key, if you look really carefully, you'll see the little plus sign will appear inside of your quick select brush. And this is working reasonably well to start out with, okay? You could also just click up here and that will also add. You'll see why using shortcut keys might be more helpful if you're trying to move a little bit quicker, so keeping the new selection, which should be the default, selected. Holding the shift key to add. Now let's try to add to our selection here, and let's see if we can get it to go a little outside of the antler. And there it is. Yeah, so the selection that we've made, and I'm going to zoom in way more here. Typically you don't want to zoom in more than 100% when you're working on a file, but in this case I want to fine-tune this selection. I want to show you what's happening here. Because I have the new selection selected here, I'm going to have to actually hold the Option key down, and that will pull up the minus. So it jumps to the minus over here, and when I let go of the Option key, it goes back to the new selection. So I hold down the Option key, and I want to subtract from my selection, and basically I'm trying to tell Photoshop, like, hey, you went a little outside the box. So now it's trying to figure out, all right, where are the contrast points? And that's pretty good. Now this selection for this particular file doesn't need to be perfect. If you wanted to make your brush a little bit smaller, left bracket key here, and let's hold the shift key this time, and let's add to our selection. So as long as the brush for the quick select tool is smaller than the area that you're trying to fill, it should do a pretty good job of adding to that selection and realizing what you're trying to do. And in this case, it's sort of recognizing the contrast. It's getting pretty close to what we want to do. So I'm going to hold the Option key down and I'm going to click minus. So again, this works good enough. It doesn't have to be perfect, but there it is. I'm going to hold the shift key again and I'm going to try to add this little tine on the rack here. Okay, and we grabbed too much, so you can keep going with the quick selection tool, but I'm going to show you how to use the lasso tool, in this case, to deselect this sort of corner in here. And actually I think the polygonal lasso tool is going to be a little bit more helpful because we're dealing with relatively straight lines in this small area right here. So again, you have some options up here at the top. I'm going to use the shortcut key of Option, and you can see that a little minus sign appears when I hold down the Option key. And what I want to do is actually click outside of the selection, drag down, and start kind of plotting out some points for where I want my selection to be. Now whenever you're doing a lasso tool, you can double click or click on the original starting point, and that will finish the selection. So in this case, I think the polygonal lasso tool is going to be the best choice for fine-tuning, especially the ends of the antlers up here. For now though, let's go back to our quick selection tool, and I'm going to use the spacebar, click and drag. I'm going to hold the shift key down. I'm going to add to my selection. And you can see when you have a very small brush like this, it's only selecting a little bit at a time. So adjusting the brush size as you go, depending on where you're trying to make a selection, can be helpful. I'm going to go ahead and increase the size by clicking in the right bracket, and then hold the shift key and then click around in here to keep adding to my selection. You can see it's grabbing more. It sees the contrast, and let's see if it gets that tip there. So it went way outside when I hit that last one on the tip. I'm also noticing that there's a little bit missing over here, so I'm going to hold the shift key down and I'm going to try to add to my selection over here. Now to fine tune it, I'm going to hold the minus key and I'm just going to say, we get a little bit too much there. Let's go ahead and come back a little bit and quite a bit less here. So holding the minus key, holding the Option key, I should say, I misspoke. Holding the Option key down to subtract from the selection is, I think, the way that we want to go here. I'm going to hold that down. Now this could be good enough. If I wanted to fine tune this more, I could go back to that polygonal lasso tool. I think that's going to be the right choice. Hold the Option key down, click, drag, click to define the point, click, click, and then double click somewhere outside of the selection. I could add to the selection over here. So I hold the shift key down, click, go up here to this point, kind of drag it over. And that's going to just add that little bit of that there. Now in terms of how a deer's antler is situated on their head, you could include sort of this base that is a part of the deer's head, or you could sort of call it right here, right? You can make some choices, some creative choices about where you want your glow to start and end. So that's one of the antlers. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for the other antler. and you can do the same thing. You can make selections using the lasso tool, polygonal lasso tool, magnetic lasso tool, quick select, magic wand. Now what you don't see here, if you have a more contemporary version of Photoshop, is one of the newer tools that you'll see under the selection over here. I don't have it because I'm dealing with Photoshop from 2018 on this particular machine. But if I go over to my other machine here, you'll see the tool is called Object Select Tool, and you'll see that above the Quick Select tool here in the menu, in the Tools palette. So the Object Select tool can be a good place to start, and then you can fine-tune using some of these other tools. So that is almost 12 minutes now that I've spent just talking about different ways of making a selection. The bottom line, select the antlers, and then let's move on to part 2. I'll stop the video here, and then we'll pick up after the antlers are selected for part 2.